Hello, my YouTube members. Good evening. How are you all doing? I hope you all are doing well. Um, I'd like to welcome you all to another lecture show of the Enlightenment and Higher Consciousness. Uh, I wanted to talk about a very controversial issue. Um, it involves the subject of pornography, the adult video industry, the pornography industry, or the adult entertainment industry. Now, within adult, the adult entertainment industry is a very vast category. It involves escorts, stripping, webcamming, and of course, adult videos, filming, and within that industry, you have the adult video industry or pornography, pornographic films. And I wanted to touch on that specific subject. Um, I want to talk a little bit about what is pornography very quickly because I think most people know, but just to provide a different perspective, just in case, again, I offer. I am not an expert in this field. I am not in the adult video industry or the adult entertainment industry. I just simply like to. I like to watch it. I have no shame in admitting that I watch it. Um, what is pornography? It comes from the Greek word. I don't want to get into specifics. Means prostitution. Um, and the purpose of pornography or adult videos is to provide sexual entertainment. Are films that present sexually explicit subject matter in order to arouse or satisfy the viewer sexually to stimulate their sexual desires. Pornographic films present sexual fantasies and usually include erotically stimulating materials such as nudity, softcore, sexual intercourse, hardcore. A distinction is sometimes made between erotic and pornographic films on the basis that the latter category contains more explicit sexuality and focuses more on arousal than storytelling. The distinction is highly subjective. Pornographic films are typically categorized as either softcore or hardcore pornography. In general, softcore pornography is pornography that does not depict explicit sexual activity or sexual penetration or extreme fetishism. In general, it contains nudity or partial nudity in sexually suggestive situations. Hardcore pornography is pornography that depicts penetration or extreme fetish acts, or both. It contains graphic sexual activity and visible penetration. A pornographic work is categorized as a hardcore if it has any hardcore content. Pornographic films are generally classified into subgenres, which describe the sexual fantasy, which the film and actors attempt to create. Subgenres can also be classified into characteristics of the performers or the type of sexual activity in which it concentrates and is not necessarily on the market to which the subgenre appeals. The subgenre usually conform to certain conventions and which each may appeal to a particular audience. In other words, there are different types of pornographic films. The history, very basic. I'm going to go briefly on it. Production of erotic films commenced almost immediately after the invention of the motion picture. Two of the earliest pioneers were the Frenchman Eugene Puyol. I don't think I'm pronouncing that correctly. And Albert Kirchner. Kirchner, under the name Lear, directed the earliest surviving erotic films for Puyol. The 7-minute 1896 film La Couture de la Marie had Louise Willy performing a bathroom striptease. Other French filmmakers also considered that profits could be made from this type of risque films showing women disrobing. And also in 1896, Fatima's Coochie Coochie Dance was released as a short Nickelodeon kinetoscope film featuring a belly dancer named Fatima. So basically, as soon as the film was invented around that time, early 20th century, late 19th century, early 20th century, these people got the idea they can create pornographic films. So it was practically almost immediate. It was pretty much conceivable very quickly. It was conceived very quickly. Then in the 1920s, 1940s, pornographic movies were widespread in the silent movie area of the 1920s. They were often shown in brothels. Soon illegal stag films, or blue films as they were called, were produced underground by amateurs for many years. Starting in the 1940s, processing the film took considerable time and resources, with people using their bathtubs to watch the film. When processing facilities often led to organized crimes were unavailable. The films were then circulated privately by traveling salesmen, but anyone caught viewing or possessing them risked a prison sentence. Then in the 1950s, all this information is coming from Wikipedia, so I just wanted to give credit. Later on, I will give my own interpretation and explanation. The post-war era saw technological developments that further stimulated the growth of mass market and amateur filmmaking, particularly the introduction of the 8mm and Super 8 film gauges, popular for the home movie market. Entrepreneurs emerged to meet the demand. In Britain in the 1950s, Harrison Marx produced films which were considered risque and which they would be described as softcore. In 1958, as an offshoot of his magazines, Marx began marketing short films for 8mm market of his models, undressing and posing topless, popularly known as glamour home movies. To Marx, the term glamour was a euphemism for nude modeling photography. Then in the 1960s, Europe and the United States, it continued, just all throughout the 1969, Denmark became the first country to abolish all censorship laws, enabling pornography, including hardcore pornography. In December 1960, American female actor Doris Wishman began producing a series of 8 pornographic films or nudist films without sex scenes, including The Hideout in the Sun, 1960, Nude in the Moon, 1961, and Diary of the Nudist in 1961. She also produced a series of sexploitation films. In the United States, producers of pornographic films formed Adult Film Association of America in 1969 after the release of the Blue Movie by Andy Warhol to fight against censorship and to defend the industry against obscenity charges. Then in the 1970s, there was a more tolerant judicial attitude toward non-mainstream films. Mainstream films did not normally screen even softcore films, leading to the rise of adult theaters in the United States and many other countries. There was also a proliferation of coin-operated movie booths in sex shops and displayed pornographic loops, so-called because they projected the movie from the film range in a continuous loop. Denmark also started producing comparatively big-budget theatrical feature film sex comedies such as Bordelette, 1972, and the Bedside Films, 1976, and the Zodiac Films, 1973-78. All right. And then, there were other movies. And then in the U.S. versus California was an important case. U.S. was Miller versus California was an important court case in 1973. The case established that obscenity was not legally protected, but the case also established the Miller test, a three-pronged test to determine obscenity, which was not legal, as opposed to indecency, which may or may not be legal. 1980s, new technology with the arrival of the home video cassette recorder. In the late 1970s and early 80s, which is my era, the pornographic movie industry experienced massive growth and spawned the adult stars like Tracy Lords, Sega, Christy Canyon, Ginger Lynn, Nina Hartley, and directors such as Gregory Dark. In 1982, most pornographic films were being shot on a cheaper and more convenient medium of videotape. Many film directors resisted this shift at first because of the videotape produced different image quality. Those who did not change were collecting. Those who did change were soon collecting most of the industry profits, since consumers only preferred the new format. Naturally, because it was easier that way. It was easier to distribute, because film, you cannot produce anything that you can distribute. It was very expensive to own a projector, film. But with the VCR, you can produce massive amounts of tapes, and you can take it home, and if you had a VCR, you can play. The technology change happened quickly and completely when directors realized that continuing to shoot on film was no longer a profitable option. This change moved the films out of the theaters and into people's homes. This marked the end of the age of the big budget productions and the beginning of the mainstream of pornography. It soon went back to its earthly roots, and expanded to cover nearly every fetish possible. Since the production of pornography was now inexpensive, instead of hundreds of pornographic films being made each year, thousands were being made, including compilations of just sex scenes from various videos. One could now not only watch pornography in the comfort and privacy of one's own home, but also find more choices available to satisfy specific fantasies and fetishes. And similarly, the camcorder spurred the changes in pornography in the 1980s, which people could make their own amateur sex movies, whether for private use or for wider distribution, meaning the camcorder was much lighter. They used to have, back in the 70s, the video recorders were a lot bigger and harder to, they had it in the 60s and 70s, but they were meant for movie companies. They're meant for commercial use, not for per. But the camcorder was made commercially for customers, and people that can be able to held it in the hand, and everybody becomes a director and an expert in it. The de facto result of the 1987 legal case, California versus Freeman, effectively legalized hardcore pornography in the U.S. prosecution. Harold Freeman was initially planned as the first in a series of legal cases to effectively outlaw the production of such movies. 1990s, DVD and the internet age. In the 1990s, pornographic films were distributed on DVD. These offered better quality picture and sound than previous video formats. Videotape allowed innovation such as interactive videos that let users choose such variables as multiple camera angles, multiple endings, and computer-only DVD content, meaning that they could put other features. You can look at behind the scenes, and they gave you more options. Where a VHS tape is just film. You saw the movie and that was it. But DVD can give you bonus features and things like that. I don't want to get to the rest of this. In the 2000s, by 2000, the fortune of the pornography industry changed, with reliably profitable DVD sales being largely supplanted by streaming media, delivering over the internet. Competition from bootleg, amateur, and low-cost professional content on the internet had made the industry substantially less profitable as a result. So technology actually made it worse. Actually kind of made the industry a lot less profitable, and kind of had a consequence. leading to its shrinking size. At the same time, it gave us a rise to video sharing platforms such as Pornhub, YouPorn, and Xhamster, and everything else. And of course, xnxs.com. It basically, the internet began to take over the pornography industry. I don't want to get into it. And I want to get into the legal status of it. The United States, the Supreme Court held in 1969 that the state laws making private possession of obscene materials a crime are invalid. Further attempts were made in the 1970s in the United States to close down the pornography industry, but by this time, by prosecuting those in the industry on prostitution charges, the prosecutions started in the courts in California in the case of People versus Freeman. The California Supreme Court acquitted Freeman and distinguished between someone who takes part in a sexual relationship for money, prostitution, versus someone whose role is merely portraying a sexual relationship on screen as part of their acting performance. So in other words, they were able to make a distinction that if you are performing in front of a camera, it's not prostitution, you're entertaining the viewer. And that is, the Supreme Court decided that they interpreted that as not prostitution, but sexual entertainment, and it doesn't fall under prostitution. The state did not appeal to the United States Supreme Court. Making the decision binding in California, where most pornographic films are made today. And since California, the state of California did not appeal to the United States Supreme Court, making the decision binding in California. So in other words, the United States Supreme Court only applies in California, so in other words, they left it to the states, where most pornographic films are made today. At present, no other state in the United States has either implemented or accepted this legal distinction between commercial pornography performers versus prostitutes, as shown in the Florida case where sex filmmaker Clinton Raymond McGowan, aka Ray Gunn, was indicted on charges of soliciting and engaging in prostitution for his creation of pornographic films, which included McGowan and his associates recruited up to 100 local men and women to participate in the group sex scenes. The affidavit says the distinction that California has in its legal determination in the Freeman decision is usually denied in most states. Local prostitution laws, which do not specifically exclude performers from such inclusion. In other words, the California, they found a distinction, but there are other states. So basically, the Supreme Court and the United States government allowed the states to make their own decision. Every other state, and so they could not the distinction that they deny those things. In other words, they don't recognize that distinction in other states, and they don't exclude performers from that inclusion. In other words, it's not included as a performance. To them, it's all prostitution, and they interpret it as everything is prostitution. With the state of California, they were able to create that distinction. And so California, it's legal. I think in New Hampshire it's also illegal, but most people in New Hampshire, but they don't do it in New Hampshire because probably the weather. So that's pretty much a brief history. How the adult video industry operates. It basically operates very simply. If you are a female performer or a male, you have to usually get hired by an agent. That's the best way to do it. Years ago, it was in the 70s and 80s. I guess you had to have somebody you knew on the inside. But today, you have to do it through an agent, and then you go into the company, you fill out a lot of paperwork. Everything is paperwork-wise. Lots of paperwork. It's everything government regulated. And then you have your do's and don'ts. You fill out an application. They tell you what you're willing to do, what you say, what you decide what you're willing or not willing to do on camera, usually for both female and males. And then you take an STD test. You have to pay for everything. So and that's about it. You don't start out making a lot of money. That's another, especially for the women, make more money than men simply because they're a commodity, they're more desired. Sometimes men do it for free, and or they get paid very little. Very rarely do male performers make a lot of money. There are exceptions, Peter North, Ron Jeremy, those guys, because they've been in the business for so long. Randy West, and they were very successful. And not everybody can do it. A lot of people fail because a lot of people think, oh, it has to do with sex. So I like to do it. Everybody's an expert when they have a desire for something. And you begin to realize, you see the reality when you attempt to try to, they usually have some kind of a performance test or whatever. And you basically, a lot of men fail, and a lot of women end up not liking it at the end, Sociological risks in the adult video industry. Well, it is a stigma. Now, all these laws, that it's illegal, that's actually not, it is the law, but it's not enforceable. Because despite it being illegal in almost every state, it's not, it's de facto, it's illegitimate, but in effect. In other words, it's the law, but it's not being enforced. So I'm sure it's being done in other states, in Miami, Florida, even New York. It's supposed to be illegal, but nobody's enforcing it. So if the law is not enforced, therefore there is no law. A law that's not enforceable, it's no law. It is a stigma. So that is, you can say, a form of way of controlling the industry, because stigmas can be just as powerful as laws. Meaning that if you enter that industry and you do it a certain amount and you are involved in that in a certain amount of time, you might, and you want to leave the industry, it is very hard for you to find work. You will probably be ridiculed. And and the risk of STDs. There have been numerous cases of STD scares, starting in 1986 with John Holmes. He went overseas. He was messed up long before he entered the industry. And then I believe in 1998, Wallace, I think his name is. Mark Wallace. He actually manipulated the test, and he was HIV positive, but he manipulated the test, and he continued performing, and he infected a few women. And then in 2004, a Canadian by the name of Laura Rox, she left Canada to pursue a job as an adult video performer, and she did a scene with a guy named Darren James. He came back from Brazil, which is like a death sentence, and as he returned, he infected her and Arroyo, another pornographic actress. She's from Spain, and another woman, Jessica D, a Czech female actress, and they all got infected. Jessica D died. Miss Arroyo, I think her name is. And so it's a very risky profession. My opinion of the adult video industry, I have mixed feelings about it. I have nothing. It is an unregulated industry. I have nothing against the concept of filming people having sex, considering the fact that it's hypocritical to criticize it when you have mainstream movies. Sharon Stone has been in movies which shows that they don't show penetration or anything, but they're showing sexual acts and sexual suggestive acts. And there are a lot of movies in mainstream movies that almost are pornographic, almost. It is an unregulated industry. It is a very semi-regulated, it's a semi-regulated industry. That means It's not always enforced all the time, and there are certain aspects of it that are completely unregulated. So sometimes drugs are used on set. So I thought that was illegal, but for some reason, yeah. And it is you don't make a lot of money. There are a lot of misconceptions that that's a gateway or road to mainstream film, and that is probably the biggest misconception. It's not you don't lead anyway. That is probably the greatest obstacle, actually. And a lot of women are naively or deceivingly are told to do this, thinking that I might end up being. And there are a few exceptions. Ron Jeremy, he did a movie, The Killing Zoe. He was an extra there. He spent only 2 seconds in a scene. And Nina Hartley, she was in Boogie Nights, but those are very rare cases, and most of the time the motion, the mainstream motion picture industry really wants to disassociate as much from the adult video industry. Again, some have made it past who were able to make that step, but that is few and far between. It is actually quite difficult. And unfortunately, a lot of young girls, especially at 18, they are very deceived. And a lot of them, and I don't blame, a lot of them come from poor areas because unfortunately our economy does not operate efficiently enough. They don't have enough work for everybody. And some states are very poor states. There's not enough employment for everyone. And a lot of 18-year-olds don't have a lot of work history, and they have to start working in low-paying jobs, and sometimes they can't even get that job, so they get tempted to work in this, adult video industry, and they get surprised when they find out that they cannot, they don't make a lot. You can make a lot of money, but you have to put up with a lot of, you have to have a lot of tolerance in what you're willing to do in front of the camera. For example, they're doing a scene called Big Guys and Thin Women, and it's an 18-year-old having sex with an older guy like myself, and she may not want to, she might have a reluctance to want to do that, but hey, this is business, Big Guys and Thin Women, Part 1, and she may not want to. It's the business. You don't get paid. You don't do the scene, you refuse to comply with doing the scene, you don't get paid. And then you get blackballed, and then you're labeled as difficult, and then you don't get no work. And they share that information with the other companies. And they forget that the adult video industry, specifically under the adult entertainment industry, the other, like webcamming, stripping, they don't make a lot of money in that either. That's why a lot of them are switching back and forth, or they are involved in many aspects of this industry. So within the adult entertainment industry, most adult video actresses or performers, they end up doing that, and also, stripping and webcamming, and sometimes they're also working as escorts because it really doesn't pay a lot in the beginning. I feel real bad for a lot of the performers, and I shouldn't have any vested interest, but they putting themselves at risk, and they put up with a lot of stress to satisfy a lot of viewers, and it's not right that they should have to be at risk. A lot of them are forced not to wear condoms, even though there is a law, but again, not enforceable. And that's why there have been cases where people have, have been infected, HIV outbreaks, There have been some recent outbreaks. Let me see here. Yeah, there was one case in 2013, Sofia Delgado contracted HIV in 2013. And then Cameron Bay was another one. And all these, pornography is very much a very risky profession, because the biggest misconception is mostly they got it from outside the industry, and that's not true. All it takes is just one person to spread it to everybody, And if you're doing a gang bang scene, It can spread very quickly. Another thing is this thing that they're going to think it can lead to mainstream films. You're not going to go to Hollywood. You're not going to Hollywood. The only wood you're going to be doing is the one on the bed. That's the only one. It's the one you're going to be sucking. That's not, you know what I mean? You ain't going to Hollywood. So all these female actresses, you need to get in your head that once you enter this industry, you will stay in this industry. If you want to leave the industry, you will be, it's going to be very hard to get out of that industry. Very hard to get employment. I mean, what are you going to put in your application? I was in the porn industry. They're going to laugh right in your face. It's very hard to get employment. You would have to almost be forced to leave the industry. So that's basically my advice for women and men deciding to enter the industry. I wouldn't suggest entering the industry at 18. You really need to do some research before you enter this industry. Remember, this industry is an industry. An industry is a collection of companies, independent companies who provide a good and service. If you look up an economics book, what an industry means. That means the adult video industry is an industry. That means there are many companies. The famous ones are Vivid and Evil Angel or something like that. But there underneath them is hundreds of companies. A lot of them, and there's actually there's a sub industry within that called amateur adult video industry, which is under the adult video industry. You have amateur, which is it's all part of the adult video industry, but it's almost like a sub industry within that industry, which is adults, which they do for free or for very little money, or they make very little money from it. But it's a stepping stone into the mainstream adult video industry, where you can work for a big company like Vivid or Evil Angel. And so my advice to women, you shouldn't go in at 18. You should really do a lot of research. First, you have to decide whether you even want to do this and be subjected to all this, because you won't. Although the money is there, you can't make it. If you want to, good example, Jamie Jameson. Yeah, she made a lot of money, but she worked very hard and never left the industry. And if you do it for 10 years, yeah, you can make a lot of money. But you have to be willing to. She also probably knew people in the industry who was able to guide her. You have to have an agent, and you have to make sure that agent's serving your interests. And sometimes you're working for a company where people are indecent, yelling at you or getting you to want to do things you don't want to do. So you need to do research, like a hierarchy. You got to know who the boss is, the company owners. You have to know what kind of a company, what kind of service, what kind of videos that they distribute, and what kind of videos that they make. If it's a company that likes to perform gangbang videos and you don't like doing gangbangs, well, that's not your company. You need to start researching. Also, you have to understand the health risk factors as well. You have to, having sex. There's nothing wrong with having sex, but you having a lot of sex, at least 2, 3, 4 times, shoots 3 to 4 times a month. You may do it with multiple partners, and even men get, it's not natural for men to have that much sex, although a lot of men brag that they do. In reality, most of them are liars. But and then you have to suffer the sociological consequences. If you have friends that find out about it, or your family, they will be devastated. Some don't care, but because of the stigma associated with this industry, and I don't think so. I don't think it should be that stigmatized, simply because it's the United States is a $10 to $15 billion industry, and in the world is $100 billion, and that number can actually be higher. Is banned in the Middle East, although I'm sure in the Middle East they get their hands on movies. And China is also banned, but I'm almost guaranteed there's a way around it. As far as you got stigma that you have to live with. If you don't do well in that industry, or if you're not making a lot of money and you want to get out, if people find out, you're finished. You're going to have problems economically because nobody's going to hire you. Eventually, you might get a job, but it's going to be a low-paying job. Um, um, I think that I don't have anything against, again, I don't have anything against the stigma. I mean, I don't have anything against the concept of pornography, because it was invented as soon as film was invented. And there's nothing wrong as long as no one gets hurt. And that's where my problem comes in. I think they should use condoms and they should really enforce it. But the problem is that you have a self-defeating issue here, because if the industry is controlled, if there's regulation, which they're already regulated, because when you sign with a company, you have to fill out a lot of paperwork, and you do have to, you have to do a lot of, you have to do STDs, testing, everything. There's a lot of things that have to go on, So what was it? Yeah. So then, if you have all that, a lot of it, it's not, you are. But unfortunately, there's a lot of other aspects to this industry that is not regulated, and the problem is that if you attempt to regulate it, it's self-defeating, because then all the companies go underground, and that's where indecent behaviors, immoral behaviors, and illegal behaviors sometimes. I don't think that they promote child pornography, because that's a separate illegal thing. Although some people accuse them of doing that because they like to show young girls who are 18 and dress them up as little girls. That's a matter of interpretation. I don't know. I don't look at that stuff anyway. I do have some favorite actresses. Her name now is Paige Jennings, but her stage name was Veronica Bain, Samantha Rome, Brianna Banks was one of my favorites. She's a veteran. I like Nina Hartley. She was in the 80s, so I'm not ashamed to admit I watch pornography. I've been watching this since 1984. I saw magazines when I was a kid, and I began to watch. Got my hands on video cassettes, and as a heterosexual male,
You've got mail.
there's no shame in it. Um, you know, I really think that this industry needs to, in order to be, gain some legitimacy, they really need to start regulating themselves. If they don't want to be regulated by the government, that's fine, but regulate yourself, because if you don't, the government is going to step in at some point and start laying down the law, because these, and not to mention, it's not just these STDs scares and everything. You have to understand, it's a subculture within that industry. That means when you're in that industry working, you're associating with people in that industry, and sometimes they have parties and all that stuff. So they got their own value system. And within a culture, you have a subculture. In our country, we have this culture of the United States, but within that culture, there are thousands of subcultures. And that's what a subculture is. That has a certain set of value systems and likes, and and common belief systems and stuff like that. And so the industry, the adult video industry or the adult entertainment industry, has a subculture, and people like to party and associate with other performers or actors or directors, and sometimes performers have sex on their own, uh, behind the camera, during, when they're not working, and you have to, as if you're a woman who, you have to realize that happens. You might be attending a party or whatever, that kind of stuff. And as for the men, I give them the same advice, that just because you're not less of a man because you can't perform in the adult industry, but if you want to, you will be subjected to the same, not to the same degree as women, but to ridicule, ostracism, and if you leave the industry, unless you're going to make it a career, like Peter North or something, I think you wouldn't care. But if you're going to leave, you have to take in consideration that there's a possibility that you're going to have a hard time getting a job. You're going to have a hard time functioning. And then you're going to end, and if you're a woman or a man, you will end up being forced, by the circumstances and the prejudice. You will be forced to return to that industry because no one's going to hire you to do it. You won't be able to have a career or do anything else. You will be forced into that industry. A lot of people nowadays who are in the industry it is becoming a trend now, because usually performers, women and men, usually become directors. But now all of a sudden there are a lot of women who are going directly, they go directly they become directors directly, never perform. I think this one woman, her name is Holly Randall. She's a director and she doesn't perform. And so that's becoming a lot of people do camera work and stuff, and they don't perform at all. I'm sure she has her reasons, and that's fine. I respect that. But anyway, that's my advice about this controversial issue. You can take the information for what it's worth. I am not an expert in this subject. I'm just this is all based on my understanding as someone who researches and watches pornography occasionally. One more thing. Another thing I don't like about the adult video industry is they also promote abnormal sexuality, and I don't want to get into the details of that, but I really think I don't have no problem with a man and woman, even group sex or gangbangs, but sometimes they do other forms of sexual acts that and it's not like people want. There's a demand for it. Is that people like, for example, gonzo porn? That is not even sex. The purpose of sex is to give and receive pleasure, and this gonzo stuff and bizarre pornography, sexual acts are, it takes away from the meaning of sex. It's not about how far you can go. This is this, and that's what it is, and that's the way it's supposed to be. So you can take the advice. You can take the information for what it's worth. If you have any questions, comments, or concerns, you can post the comment in the comment section. Until next time, I want to wish all my YouTube members good evening, good luck, and may God bless you all until we contact each other again.